Can I ask you a question? I ask all these other people. I give it the other way around. I always ask the rock star, when do your kids know that you're cool? Like, do they know you're a cool dad? But when did you know that your dad was not average dad and that he was cool?
When he took me to go see Kiss on the Dynasty tour, took me backstage, I met all of them, and then they took their fucking makeup off.
Whoa, that's right. Carmen, you got that?
Get that, sorry.
Carmen?
Yeah, I got it.
That's fine.
They took their makeup off in front of me.
Wow.
And I was 6 years old.
Yeah,
and at that time, I believed Gene was a demon. Paul was a star child. Ace was, you know what I mean? Like,
I was going to say, did you start crying? You're like,
did.
no.
He's got some great pictures. He had some great Facebook pictures of that.
I have pictures of that day, and I remember that Peter Criss asked me why, he's like, it's something about like, so Kiss is your favorite band or whatever. He's like, you don't like the Bee Gees? I go, what? Like, I was so obsessed with Kiss that I was just like, no, you guys are the coolest.
That's so funny.
Ever. And
That's so funny.
So that was like a major dad move, and I was like, thank you, Dad.
That's the thing. It's all the guys who are super famous, whose kids say, "Yeah, I was cool when I took them to see another band." That's always what it is. I remember Kevin Nash, the wrestler. He said, "My son was cool. He had this rock band that he really liked, and I took him. He got to meet them, and then he was like, oh, my dad's pretty cool.'"
It's so funny. I was online, and I become buddies with this guy named Clay Cook, and he's like, "Oh, I'm a fan of Saigon Kick." I'm like, "Oh, that's really nice." And I was working on a solo record at the time. He's like, "Oh, I'd love to play on it." So I start to, we start to become buddies, and I send him some music. He sends me music back, and he's like, "Oh, I'm coming to Charlotte. If you want to come to the show." I'm like, "I'll go to your pub and see your band or whatever. Sure, I'll come support you." He's like, "Yeah, we're playing, the amphitheater." I'm like, "What?" So I go to my son. I'm like, "Yeah, this kid, says he's a guitar player in the Zach Brown band or something."
Oh,
like that.
that's so funny.
So my son's like, "What? You gotta break." So we went to the show, and he brought him on stage, and brought him on the bus with all the guys and hanging out. And I had no, 40,000 people there. I'm like, oh. Great. Then I realized Clay also co-wrote John Mayer's first record. They were roommates together and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm so oblivious. But yeah, that's when my son was like, oh,
yeah,
that's cool.
That's when Dad's cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome.